Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barn. Today we're going to talk about Politico made a big boo-boo. I don't know. You can make this mistake, unless it's not a mistake, but who knows. They did issue a correction, but they claimed that Ketanji Brown Jackson was going to be the first person on the black person on the Supreme Court. Of course, she would be the first black woman. Not the first black person, not the first woman, not the first woman of color, but yes, first black woman on the Supreme Court, which of course there could have been other black woman on the court, but ironically, Joe Biden and Democrats promised to filibuster such person. So of course it's important when they want that black person to be acknowledged. So I want to talk about that today. Also, there's a grim, horrific story about a pro-life activist who found some bodies of some viable fetuses from an abortion clinic in DC, and they believe, based on the evidence and how their experts they had analyzed it, that some of these children were illegally killed, and the DC has decided that they're not going to do an autopsy, the last I heard anyway. And I don't even know if they're really going, because a pro-life activist took the evidence and hid it in their house and stuff. So and then it got tipped off that they had some biohazard or waste or something. So I don't even know if they're going after that person as hard as they could for taking that material, as you could call it, because I think they want to make this very hush hush. And it is a pretty gruesome, horrific thing. I do have photos from the story. I don't want to show them until the very, very tail end. So I'm going to talk about everything else I want to talk about today. And I'm going to go into that story last, and I'm going to go through this article detailing just some of the accounts of what happened. And then at the very end, I will give you warning, and because it is pretty graphic and hard to watch, and or hard to see, just something so barbaric and evil that we allow to happen in our nation. And so this is an abortion clinic, an abortion doctor that pro-life activists have been sounding the alarm on for a while, and it's happened in their clinic. So I just can't imagine doing something like this to a little tiny child. So anyway, let's start on with the news of the day. You guys know that I like to start with something funny. David Hogg tweeted something really, really silly about when are we gonna regulate uteruses as much as we regulate guns, or uteruses are more regulated than than guns. But of course that's not true. Super not true. So I did retweet him and mock him for that. But there's another thing that he said that was pretty ridiculous. And the Defiant L was the one who put this together. So I thought this was funny. Y'all love telling us to get an education until we actually use it. And then later on, he said something like, if you need a license to kill a deer, why don't you need one to kill humans? Yeah, so not much going on for Mr. David Hogg, who got accepted to Harvard because he's a left-wing activist, essentially. So Ben Shapiro said that he'd be a disgrace to Harvard if Harvard wasn't already a disgrace to itself. If you don't know how hard it is to get a gun, which it's not extraordinarily hard, but if you do order one, they do background checks. There's people who don't believe that you actually have to be checked. There's people who believe that you can just go to a gun show and just pick one up on that day, that they don't do background checks, and that's just absolutely not accurate. So Steven Crowder actually started this program on his show where it was like gift a gun, where you would get a gun for someone and then they would see that you can't just get one and you have to do some kind of background check, period. So he had some people who had kind of changed their mind after they kind of saw the process. And he actually had did some segments where he would take people who didn't seem to like guns or were afraid of them, and then they would take them to get some training at a range. And then there are people who were like, oh, you know what, that was actually pretty fun, I think I'm going to continue to do this. So I think a lot of people's fears surrounding guns is just comes from a place of not being super educated on it. There's one pro-gun activist who decided to learn about guns because he realized that he did have this irrational fear about them. So once he like decided to actually get some training and start handling them, then he became like an NRA sponsored person. So a lot of people just don't understand guns, and then a lot of people just have the rhetoric surrounding guns. But I find most people who trash them don't have a lot of education regarding guns. And even there was an article where someone, I think maybe this was in the Washington Post a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, but someone was trying to look into background checks and gun control. And the more that they researched about the subject of gun control, they realized that everything that people on the left say that we need to do isn't really going to solve the problem. So, and this was someone on the left who was doing the report assuming that they would validate their own beliefs, and then ended up being proved wrong when they actually looked at the data and the research and all those goodies. So David Hogg, quite a young guy, quite a young fool. Anyway, if you guys did not know, there was a Trump rally in Michigan. Some of you may know because I mentioned it, but I did sing the national anthem at the rally. I will probably try to get a clip and show you guys tomorrow if you haven't seen it. I did find like one that, people don't like to stream stuff live with Trump because they just take it down everywhere. But there were a couple live streams, and I did find one. It wasn't the super clearest, but I did end up putting it on my TikTok. Got loads of compliments from it. People were very kind. So I think I'll try to maybe find a better one and maybe post it tomorrow and some photos and other stuff. If you've never been to a Trump rally, it's really interesting. I haven't actually been to one since 2016. I didn't go to any in 2020 election cycle, actually. So it's been a long while, but I did go to like 5 of them, I think, maybe around that time. And they're extraordinarily long days. So some people have gone to like 20, and I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot. But they are a lot of fun. The president is very he's a showman, is a good way to put it. And he had a lot of good zingers about Joe Biden, the current president of the United States, about his mind, his mental capacity. Just a lot of good jokes around that particular topic. He had a lot of good points that he made as far as giving the revved up, this is what's wrong with our country right now. And he hit a lot of really good targets, like parental rights. He was talked about that for a little while. He talked about the crisis at the border. He talked about, I think he talked about foreign policy, talked about the economy, which isn't doing too hot right now, which they'll try to brag about. Oh, well, we have all these people who are going to get their jobs. You mean the ones that they lost before? Okay. All right. If you want to try to take the W for that, you could try. But there was some commentators talking, maybe it was on CNN or maybe it was even MSNBC. They're like, people go to the gas tank, they see the gas, and it's still high every day. So it doesn't matter how much you talk about job growth or et cetera, because this is the economic report that they're seeing every day that they're upset about. Like with inflation being so high, it's like people are paying more than $400 a month extra than what they would have been paying before. And the wage growth that has happened isn't high enough to compete with inflation. Now, if you work at a job at like, I don't know, post office or something where they actually do have it like calculated and into like the union agreements that you get a pay bump every time there's inflation. I wonder how many different I don't know, government sort of jobs there are that has that figured in, because there's got to be people who actually don't mind that there's inflation because it's automatically gonna just get them more pay anyway. So I wonder how many jobs have that factored in. But like the postal service, yeah, if there's inflation, it's in their contracts with their union agreements and stuff that their pay will automatically adjust. But everybody else, your wages are probably what they are naturally. They're as high as they are right now because people had to be wooed into going to work. But milk is high. Meat, all kinds of different stuff. I went and picked up a few things at the grocery store this morning, and usually my sister who I live with goes inside the store and picks up some stuff, and I just kind of sit in the car. And so I haven't been in there in a minute, and I was like, oh geez, this is different, this is different, this is different, this is higher than I remembered. So and I knew it was higher. In food, when you go pick up different places and restaurants, is way higher than what you remember. Like I went to Taco Bell to get one of the their boxes or whatever, then they didn't have a box. I'm like, okay, we'll get me like a 2 chalupa meal or something. And man, it was $10. I'm like, I could have had a gigantic burrito at Qdoba or something paying like this. I'm like, for Taco Bell? So prices are just really, really outrageous right now. So people are feeling it. But Pete Buttigieg and Biden and all those folks, Granholm, they're saying if you want to do something about the gas prices, then we're just gonna have to just shift away into just cleaner stuff, greener stuff. That's their mindset, not increasing sort of our capacity here. They just want to push everyone into green energy. Joe Biden said that the families would save $500 a month, which he got a correction and said, oh, he misspoke. And perhaps he misspoke and meant to say 500 a year, which is still debatable. But instead of 500 a month, but the fact check is like, he misspoke because people don't pay that much for their energy cost a month. So maybe it was maybe he misspoke, maybe it was a lie, whatever, but it was wrong. It was wrong. But they are trying to push this narrative that we have to just commit to the greener pasture sort of thing instead of utilizing what we have. And again, I've said this many times, I don't mind the greener stuff if it fiscally makes sense, if it naturally makes sense. But if you're trying to force everyone just economically off of fossil fuels because you have an agenda, that's not going to work. If it's fiscally responsible, if it makes sense for people to do the solar and the wind and all the other stuff, people will naturally just go to it. But trying to kind of jerry-rig Frankenstein everyone into the green economy is just not going to make sense. It's going to hurt a lot of people in the end. But let's listen to Pete for a second.
Less dependent on foreign oil, and that protects us from shortages at fuel stations. But here's the thing to remember. Even if all of the oil we use in the USA were made in the USA, the price of it is still subject to powers and dynamics outside of the USA, which means that until we achieve a form of energy independence that is based on clean energy created here at home, American citizens will still be vulnerable to wild price hikes like we're seeing right now.
Okay, so they keep talking about the market, and they're saying no matter how much we produce of our own oil and use our own oil and stuff, it doesn't matter because OPEC, etc. But so and they go with this and they try to make it really known like, hey, Biden has nothing to do with our gas prices, etc. Even though when gas prices went up, I think a little tiny bit under Trump, and of course they got pretty low under Trump, you had Schumer and other Democrats go to like the highest gas station they could find in DC and do like a little press conference. But if they don't believe that they can affect the price of gas, especially with our own supply, then why do they keep tapping into our emergency supply? And why were Democrats bragging when they did it some months back and like, oh gosh, look at this. And they had a graph and they zoomed it out so it looked like it was a big, sort of decline when it was just like 2 cents. it was pretty embarrassing. But they're also, tapping into the strategic oil reserves as well. But those are really meant for emergencies. They're not meant to just make the prices go down a little bit when it's midterm time, So they're going to have to think of some better strategies in that, and really don't stop trying to pull one on the American people. Like people know. I mean, I saw a great post where someone had a sign at the gas station that said, "Please stop removing the Joe Biden stickers. If you voted for him, then you should be proud to pay these prices at the gas station." And of course, no one is proud and happy to do that. I guess people who want to force you into electric cars, which there's a lot of people who have investments in electric cars. Jennifer Granholm, who's our energy secretary, she had to sell some stock because she got into a pretty big scandal when people started to point out, hey, you're invested in this company, and didn't like Biden come and speak there, and it just seems a little fishy. Some of your energy policies seem a little fishy. So it was a pretty big deal. But again, Jennifer Granholm is a former governor of Michigan, and when she was a governor of Michigan, we referred to that time as the lost decade. Now, I don't know if all we is like the whole state. I am in a Republican bubble. That is just what we say. But it was pretty hard during those times under the Granholm administration, and it was hard under the Obama and stuff time too. But it was just really, really rough under her time. So when I tell people that, they just roll their eyes, or they scoff, or they just kind of collapse into themselves, dismayed that she failed upwards to be over energy policy. And Pete, same thing. He wasn't a great mayor, but here he is, over transportation. But Biden has some really awful people in his executive branch. Just saying. Before I move on, I do want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website, including different articles. I did drop one yesterday regarding Will Smith, and I know a lot of people are sick of talking about it, but Denzel Washington had said, Will Smith said that Denzel Washington told him that at your highest time or something, that's when the devil will attack. And I'm just like, if you have the devil on speed dial, don't be surprised how quickly he makes a fool out of you. So that's pretty much the premise of the article. So go ahead and check that out, and also check out different other articles as well. I've talked a lot about Disney lately and their radical shift to, well, it's not really a shift, but there have been some videos that have come out of some people talking in their Reimagine Tomorrow meeting with a lot of their, I guess, LGBT agenda, and they've come out against the Don't Say Gay bill, which isn't the Don't Say Gay bill, it's the Parental Rights and Education bill, and we've talked about that also on the website. So if you need any sources, including good sources that actually have links with parents and examples with parents who have gone through situations where teachers have tried to radicalize their kids, you can go to blacktnews.com, because there's people who just claim there's no need for anything like this, and that's absolutely not true. There are examples. If you are unaware, you're just uninformed. So go ahead and get informed and go to blacktnews.com and check out that stuff on the website. I'd also like to thank Brighter Michigan PAC. I am in their studio today. If I said something today that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It does not work like that. But they just like to uplift conservative voices, and I do appreciate what they do, especially in the state of Michigan, where I am from and streaming from. And also check out different merchandise that we have on the website, like the cool goat hoodies and the cool goat shirt. I do have those in different colors. You want to check that out. I got the I Am Not the Victim You're Looking For shirt. I saw people posting, Fox News had an article about different people that Disney had fired, which I had written an article pretty much about that maybe a few months back. But you guys can check that out on the website. But Gina Carano was one of those people, and that's why I made this shirt. I'm not the victim you're looking for. They really tried to break her down. And Disney even lied about the reason why they fired her. The real reason why they got rid of her is because she offended the pronoun mafia. On Twitter, everyone was putting their pronouns in their bio, and they were pressuring Gina to do it. And so she just wrote beep, bop, boop And then people flipped out on her, and then Disney wanted her to apologize. And she said, I'll apologize, but I'm not going to do some kind of fake apology. Like, I want to be legit with what I'm saying and just try to explain where I'm coming from, and that she didn't mean any disrespect, but to the people, not disrespect to the community as a whole, but disrespect to the people who tried to bully her. And so Disney was like, you guys, you're trying to solve this logically, but people had an emotional reaction. And she's like, but I should be able to explain things logically. So Disney wanted her to get on some kind of phone call with like 40 different LGBT people. I guess, I don't know if it's outside the community or outside of Disney, or maybe some of their employees or whatever. But she didn't want to do that because frankly, it sounds like a setup. Like, I don't know, white woman gets on and apologizes for being a filthy human being or something like that. So she was like, how about we go out to dinner? I take him out to dinner with like 4 people, and we can look into each other's eyes and see that we're all humans, etc. And Disney didn't like that. So that was actually the last time that Disney/Lucasfilm had any contact with her, and she stopped doing promotional work for The Mandalorian. That's the show she was on before. And she would post like conservative type things on Twitter in between that time, but then she like said one that was like rebuking people basically for their reactions with COVID and snitching on their neighbors, and made a Holocaust reference. And the Disney was like, how dare you disrespect the Jewish people and their faith? You're no longer working with us. But really, where they decided that they wanted to get rid of her traces back down to that moment. But I wrote an article talking about her and talking about the Bachelor host and other people who Disney decided to let go and cancel for their wokeness. So I think Fox News is probably talking about it right now, because people are turning around trying to cancel Disney, I suppose you could say. So I think they're just like, just FYI, all fair is fair is maybe their approach, but I totally wrote about that before. So another thing you guys can check out on blacktnews.com. So let me talk about Politico. And again, could have been like an honest mistake, I guess. But Ketanji Brown Jackson will likely be confirmed as the first Black Supreme Court justice by the end of this week. So of course, there's a big problem. That would be the problem, Thurgood Marshall and Clarence Thomas there have superseded her. So she definitely won't be the first Black person. So Politico came out and said, "Oh, we meant first Black woman," and that'll be accurate, and she will probably be confirmed. There's been a lot of things in her past and her different rulings that have alarmed me, have disturbed me, that we've talked about on the show. The Democrats have been so offended that Republicans have brought up her record as a judge, which should be really fair game to talk about in a confirmation hearing. Nobody's trying to destroy her entire life, but like when you see a consistent sort of record where you get, sort of lenient sentences to, child pornographers and people who distribute it, that's disturbing. And so I was open to hear an explanation. I never really personally thought she came from a place or explained a way that made me feel okay about it, but there's other things obviously that I didn't like about her as well. But it looks like, unless something else happens, she's going to get confirmed, because it looks like all the Democrats are going to be lockstep. And then also you're going to have maybe crossover with Collins. So I don't have any doubt that she'll be the first Black woman. But Lindsey Graham, I think in his opening with the confirmation hearings, did point out that there could have already been a female Black person on the Supreme Court, but Joe Biden actually said he would filibuster her. So the Democrats tried to kill that before. So I was thinking about this because I was listening to the Christian radio station, who's a local Michigan Christian radio host, Bob Duco. I was listening to Bob Duco's show sometime last week, maybe middle of last week. And he brought this up, the fact that Democrats blocked already a Black woman, but she was conservative. And now they want everybody to be like, oh, just, not just put Ketanji through, but they're like, oh, this is such a magnificent moment, and et cetera, and we should celebrate, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, but they blocked her because he's like, I'm not going to pretend and claim that Democrats did it because they're racist. I'm assuming they did that because of her ideology, and they want Ketanji because of her ideology, and it's not a racial thing. I think he's partially correct. And I don't think Democrats would be willing to block a Black conservative because they're racist. I'm not making that argument, but I do think that it does concern them when people can see Black conservatives in a rise to power. As Clarence Thomas talked about in his hearing, he called it the high-tech lynching. And he said, this is what people want you to know, that this happens when you're an uppity Black who kind of strays too far from the path, that they will demean you, that they'll destroy your reputation. Now, from recent history, we know that you don't have to be a person of color or for the Democrats to go at you and to just utterly just try to destroy your life. We saw that with Brett Kavanaugh. So I'm not saying it's specifically something that they only do to Black candidates. But I do think there is a grave concern there of people seeing that there's a possibility to think differently. Larry Elder talked about this when he was running for governor. He was interviewed by a bunch of different papers, and the subject came up about, like, why aren't there more Black conservatives or Black Republicans, etc. And he brought up the fact that there would be like these Black magazines like Jet, Ebony, etc. I can't remember which one specifically he was talking about, but they would make examples of like people with their ideology. But if it was someone who was like a conservative type person, that's not someone that they would highlight, because there's a particular view of Blackness that they want to elevate. The Nicole Hannah Jones, who's with the 1619 Project, she said on Twitter, there is a difference between being Black and being ethnically Black and being politically Black. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And she's like, well, if you don't know, you just don't know. And then there was someone who replied to her like, I'm Black and I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, yeah, I can see from your avatar you're Black. If you don't know, you just don't know. Well, I can wager a guess, like, what your skin color, there's nothing really prideful to really have about that. Like, I didn't do anything to get it. You're just born that way. But being politically Black, there's a particular set of values they expect you to have. Culturally Black too, they expect you to be a particular way with the culture. People accused Kanye West of not being down with the culture a couple of years ago, and he said, no, I'm not down with the culture. Doesn't make any sense where you're talking about prison reform, yet you rap about things that would land you in prison. He's like, I'm not for that anymore. I'm free. And I just using that example, Kanye West isn't like the gold standard of thinkers, but he had a point. They uphold Black culture, Black politics in a certain sort of light. So I do think that if you had more people like Clarence Thomas popping up in different places, that upsets people. When Tim Scott was at the signing for the tax cuts, people were like, oh, they got their token person here. And Tim Scott had so much to do with the bill, it would not make sense for him not to be there. But people are like, here's the Black guy. They had to trot out their Black guy. They're Black. It wouldn't make sense for him not to be there. He was such a big part of getting it passed and how it was written and pushed through. So for people to just look at him and just value him down to his skin color, not because I think they think so much of Republicans had to do that, but it was important for them to degrade the Republicans to say this is just their trot out person rather than breaking him down in a more significant sort of way. They have to degrade you if you think differently. There was a pretty viral TikTok over the weekend of a young black woman who used to be a Democrat, who used to be a liberal. And she was complaining pretty emotionally that she has never, even when she was a Democrat, conservatives, Republicans never talked to her the way that Democrats talk to her. And everything that Democrats said about Republicans is true about the Democrats. Now, I do find it amazing that no one ever called her a libtard because Republicans like to say that. I don't say that, though, but there are a lot of people on the right who like to throw that around. So I found it amazing that she's never been insulted, just, I guess, in general, because it depends who you run into on the internet, I guess. But as far as people talking about your skin color and degrading you, oh yeah. That's something I personally haven't really run into just in life in general, besides being vocal about politics and people being offended that I think differently. So I get where she's coming from. And then a friend of mine replied to her video, and they're from Canada. So they're like, well, I'm not a Republican, but I'm a gay conservative. And they had a similar story. People came out against him more aggressively as he became conservative. So they're so hell-bent on protecting their culture, protecting their sort of black identity or identity politics, period, that that group has to be in line and lockstep with the Democrat Party or leftist thinking, or et cetera, that they will try to karate chop you down into nothing if you kind of show people that there are alternatives. And that's been something that I've observed, and is something that I think we all know is true. I've mentioned this several times. There's Pew research done that Black Americans, 85% see being Black as being part of their identity, being essential to their identity. With white people, it's like 15%. So when people talk about like this collective white identity, I don't really think it exists in the way that they want it to exist, but they're really, really trying to politically. Like, white people might be proud to be Italian or Irish or Polish or something like that, but like a collective whiteness sort of thing, it's not like it part of the identity like it is this perception of being Black. But when people ask, why do so many Black people vote Democrat? It's because Democrats have gone through such lengths to try to marry this idea of Blackness with being Democrat. Now, when I was younger and people would find out I was a Republican, they'd be like, just a little like surprised, like that's not a thing that's supposed to be, how, and which is funny considering that's the origin was like Black people were Republican, right? Party of Abolition, Party Free the Slaves, Frederick Douglass, Dyed in the Wool Republican, first Black senators, congressmen, all Republican, etc. And things started like changing 30s-ish, and with like the New Deal, etc. And that's when you start to see like, big chunks kind of start changing, which is ironic because a lot of things in the New Deal didn't even work out for Black people, but whatever. And a lot of people just have the perception that after Goldwater, that's when everybody kind of shifted, but that's not true. It really happened earlier than that. It's more complicated. The Black people living in the Republican Party, etc. But that's pretty much the origin, right? And it seems so strange. It's so weird, and people question it. But now people are just so angry. Like, people would treat you differently, and it'd be weird and stuff. And people would at times be aggressive. But someone told my dad he's more dangerous than any white supremacist, which is pretty bizarre. Pretty bizarre. So I hope people begin to wake up and see that it is okay to be different. And maybe it's kind of my algorithm where I fall on social media and TikTok and stuff, but it seems like there's more people kind of waking up every day and deciding to think for themselves. I think COVID red pilled a lot of people. I think Joe Biden is red pilling a lot of people because so many people were told orange man bad, so vote against the orange man. And they're like, oh shoot, this isn't how I thought it would be. And do you recall how bad people thought America would be off after Trump was elected, and people just kept waiting for war? People kept just waiting for the economy to crash. People kept waiting for all these things. And life was actually pretty good. And now you have Biden, and everything that people pretty much said about like how Trump's presidency or whatever would be is what you're kind of experiencing with Biden, and including corruption, because people were so dead set like the Russian collusion, all the other kind of stuff. That was all wash. But you have this stuff with Biden and Ukraine and Hunter and all this other stuff, and the 10% for the big man. So yes, Biden is wrapped up in all this stuff, but I mean, we'll end up seeing if any of that will come to fruition. We don't know. By fruition, I mean like some kind of punishment or something. I'm not optimistic about that in the least bit, personally. But we've known the laptop was real for some time. I have anyway. I know the media is just now sort of admitting it. So I wonder if Politico, maybe it was a mistake. I don't think a lot of mistakes happen the other sort of way. But this is a huge mistake to say the first, black person on the Supreme Court. And I have seen people post like she'll be the second, and they're like, before you correct me, I know what I said. And people who are claiming it is so important and so vital to have this black woman on the Supreme Court are so eager to push out Clarence Thomas. People want him to resign because of his wife, and they want him to recuse himself. They really just want him gone. And now that they have this black, Democrat or really leftist person who's going to be on the court, why do they need that other black face there? And they don't like Clarence Thomas anyway. But when people pretend that the race is just the most important thing, it's not. It's obviously not. And the ideology really matters. And that's content character. That's what we should be focusing on. That's what we should be focusing on. But so many people pretend on the left, like your skin color, your sex, your gender, like all those things are like some kind of important virtue. And it's not. You didn't do anything to earn it, deserve it. Like, that's just how you were born. It's just how you were born. So we really should be looking at ideology. However, again, I will say that I kind of disagreed with Bob Dutko a little bit. He's like, well, I think the Democrats in the past, when they block other people who could have been on the Supreme Court or whatever, it's not because they're racist. It's because, ideology. I don't think it's because they're racist, but I think it's because I think it plays a role as well. As we cannot allow Republicans to have this up on us. They can't allow that. They cannot allow that. Like, they really, really want a woman, like in the era of like Hillary Clinton when she was running against Trump. They really, really wanted that first female president. But like, did they like Carly Fiorina when she was going to war with Trump? Sure, yeah, they did. But would they celebrate and elevate womanhood so much if they're someone on the right? Mm-mm. And sometimes the right will play along, and they'll be like, "Yeah, even though they're different, political whatever, I'm good. Yeah, I'm happy." I don't feel that way. Like, I didn't take particular pride in Obama being president because I didn't think he'd be a good president, and I was correct. And if you're you're gonna have a first black president, it always makes if you're gonna have the first black president or biracial president or whatever, I would like them to do a good job. So I same way with Kamala. People are excited about Kamala. I'm like, I don't like her, so I'm not particularly excited. Are there people out there who feel like, yeah, it's possible now? I can see that it's possible now. I can understand that more with Obama. than like Kamala, Um, but there's good people who run all the time of different genders and races, and there's all kinds of factors that go into why they end up being the top one on spot. And Kamala Harris is there because she's a woman of color. It's not because she's talented. We can all see that, right? Like Joe, like some of her word salads are just insane. Like Joe Biden is mentally declining. What is her excuse? Anyway, talked about that enough, I think. I want to talk about this story with this gruesome story again, and I will show these pictures at the very end. I will give you like a heads up. Um, Pretty dark, pretty gruesome. So Live Action, you can go to their website and read this report. Aborted babies discovered in DC may indicate infanticide after attempted abortions. Physician experts have told Live Action News that 5 aborted children in a DC apartment appeared to have been viable human beings, raising questions about potential legal and serious ethical violations by the abortion clinic. Dr. Robin Perucci, a neonatal specialist, told Live Action News, "I can say with confidence that these babies died at an age when they were viable, premature people." In her Friday morning comment, she noted that she was going to work at an ICU where she would care for little ones this size and age. During Thursday press conference, DC police quickly dismissed the possibility that the babies experienced illegal abortions, but declined to comment further when asked by Live Action News. Although DC doesn't ban late-term abortions, medical professionals are still bound by federal laws which restrict the method of abortion and require life-saving care for infants born after botched procedures. Life-saving care is something Dr. Cesar Santiago, who operates a facility where the discarded babies were discovered, has already said repeatedly that he either doesn't provide or avoids. So this is an abortion doctor they've had on their radar for a minute. Pro-life activists voluntarily informed the DC homicide unit of the babies and surrendered them to authorities. Details are forthcoming, but the progressive anti-abortion uprising group to which the activist belongs believes late gestation ages, as well as their apparent sustained injuries, potentially show violations of the Partial Birth Abortion Act, as well as the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. The group also announced that a funeral mass and naming ceremony was offered for the babies. Live Action president and founder Lila Rose said in a response, "The discovery of these bodies is horrific and disturbing evidence of the infanticide that may be occurring in this clinic within our nation's capital, and indicative of the violence happening in abortion facilities nationwide." Now, I do want to say it's pretty crazy when there's so many debates that go on like TikTok in regard to abortion and pro-life, and I think it's mostly because a lot of people get a lot of views on it, a lot of clicks on it. Um, because there'll be a lot of young people who will be arguing and they don't know a lot of the facts, and even hosting debates about it and not know a lot of facts. But again, it gets for whatever reason, you can get like hundreds of viewers at a time watching pro-life debates, especially if you allow people to come in and comment and etc. So it's a topic a lot of people talk about. And when people bring up late-term abortion, they'll say that no woman would do it unless it's for medical reasons. And Pete Buttigieg also, like when he was on the campaign trail, he's on The View, and he defended his position on late-term abortion. And he's like, people buy these cribs. And he's like, you really think these people would just go ahead and do it? And so he really shifted the conversation. Meghan McCain was like, you're just as radical as I thought you were, and people around America aren't going to really like your answer. And so I think there was a New York Times article when someone did some research on reasons why women do late-term abortion, and they found that many women who do late-term abortions are for the same reason that people do early-term abortions, which could be because of jobs, which because a relationship doesn't work out, because of finances, etc. Things that which, if bodily autonomy, in my opinion, is the most important thing that matters to you, why would it matter? Why would it matter? Because the same reasons that you may abort early on can still apply later on in late term abortion. So I wasn't surprised to find out that similar reasons in the beginning are similar reasons why people would do a late term abortion. And sometimes I'll bring up Kermit Gosnell. If you don't know about Kermit Gosnell, he's a serial killer who had an abortion clinic. And there is a movie. They did a movie about it. Gosnell. It was like a low budget sort of Christian film. Maybe it wasn't a Christian film, but Dean Cain was in it. I think he was like the biggest star who was in the film. But it was a very unsafe clinic. Women would go there and acquire STDs. It was filthy. There were cats everywhere, like waste everywhere. He kept body parts in jars, and it was just really, really gross. But he ended up getting convicted. I think there was maybe 7 counts or 6. I think maybe ended up getting convicted of maybe 6 counts. And a lot of the testimony was, they didn't have a lot of evidence for stuff, and it was a lot of like employees giving testimony about different things. But someone did take a picture of one baby they aborted, and it was very late. And he would even joke like he could have taken it to school or something along those lines. And there were other employees who had testified and said that they had they would induce abortions, and they would snip their spines. And one employee said that he had did that like hundreds of times, and that was just kind of the procedure at the clinic. So even though he only got convicted for like 6 that they could, I don't know, find the evidence or actually charge him with, there are people claiming that they've done those sort of things hundreds, if not thousands of times in the clinic. So that would mean that there are women who go there who are willing to have them that late, and they're not all going to that disgusting, filthy clinic for medical reasons. So there are people really want women to have the freedom to do this, but you have to know some of the horrific things that you are allowing them to do to viable children who could survive. And people could say, well, they're unwanted. They're not unwanted. They're not unwanted. There are more people willing to adopt newborns than the available number of newborns. So they're not unwanted. Maybe unwanted to the mother for whatever reason. But they have a right to life. And if you, especially at conception, I would argue they have a right to life. But we're talking about babies who can feel pain. We're talking about babies who can feel pain. I'm going to go on with this article. Baby boy number 1 should have been in a nursery. Perhaps the largest and most developed baby found was a boy whose gestational age has been estimated to be around 28 to 32 weeks, well within the 3rd trimester, past the point at which the majority of experts agree preborn babies can feel pain, and beyond the point many states have restricted abortions for medical and ethical reasons. For example, the Mississippi law that came before the Supreme Court limits abortions to just 15 weeks based on concerns surrounding fetal development, pain, and other factors. Photos and video of the first boy reveal that he remained largely intact, raising questions about how his life ended. He also has what appears to be a fully formed face, fingers, toes, and all the primary features normally viable in newborns. Dr. Kathy Altman, a former abortionist who later became pro-life, told Live Action News that he appears to be in the 3rd trimester near term and looks like he should have been in the nursery. Dr. Patty Giebink similarly said in a via email that this baby boy looks close to term gestation and pretty much intact, adding that she couldn't believe they would abort a nearly full-term baby unless there was something terminally wrong with the baby, but it doesn't appear so. He is totally intact, but his skin is somewhat macerated, Altman said. In other words, it has begun to degenerate, which could indicate that he was probably dead when he was aborted, or he was not well preserved and his tissue began to deteriorate after the abortion. He appears to be completely normal and was probably aborted using the induction method, which uses medication to induce labor. He looks about the same size as my granddaughter when she was born. So I do have a picture. Again, I will show that at the end. I will give you fair warning. Baby girl number 1 may have experienced an illegal partial birth abortion. Many of the baby's bodies showed deep lacerations or other forms of damage that likely resulted from abortion procedures, inflicting significant trauma with deep pain prior to their deaths. One of the baby girls could be seen with her right eye open, significantly damaged to her head, and with the rest of her body relatively intact. Footage shows her curled in the fetal position with pinkish tan skin as her lifeless, half open eye looks into the distance. According to Club, the baby appeared to be at 28 to 30 weeks at the time of her likely abortion. This baby appears to be somewhere between 28 to 30 weeks gestational age, with evidence of deep lacerations to the posterior neck, which presumably correlates to the method of abortion used to end her life. NLM notes that at that point, all parts of the baby's eyes are developed, footprints and fingerprints are forming, and your baby may startle in response to loud noises. The doctors have acknowledged that the baby can feel pain at this stage. One abortionist previously told Fox News that at 23 weeks, babies start developing the the fibers for processing pain. The prevailing timeline of pain at 24 weeks, however, has been questioned by Dr. Stewart Derbyshire, who previously called fetal pain a misnomer. Derbyshire recently published an article which he suggests babies could actually feel pain as early as 12 weeks. By the way, people, I think a lot of people feel comfortable at 12 weeks for whatever reason. By week 10, most of the babies, like, internal organs have, like, the major ones have formed at that point. There's so much development that happens by week 10. And I've saw my nephew at week 14 when he was, on the sonogram. And I just can't imagine doing something just, I mean, they're teeny tiny. The Planned Parenthood and them, these clinics, they'll say it's nothing, it's a glob of glue, or it's just like a pea. But just because it's just a teeny tiny human doesn't mean that it's not a human, that it's not alive, that it's not rapidly developing. And there's more. There's other babies that they have pictures of them. But there was 5 in total. And as I'm reading the article, there are pictures here that I have to look at as I'm reading the articles. It's really disturbing, and um, I'm gonna pause. This is hard for me. But someone noted about this article and on Twitter, and they made the point that if you don't see some of these horrific things and talk about them, like, people don't like to go around showing pictures of aborted babies for kicks or something like that. But when Emmett Till was killed, his mother had an open casket so people could see the horrors that people did to her son. And that really helped with the civil rights movement. So sometimes you got to see this stuff to know how horrific it is, and to feel that fire within you to continue fighting for the rights of these children, these unborn children. And I would hope some of these images could fuel people's hearts and minds to change their opinion about abortion and what's done, especially at this stage, because there are people who argue no restriction, no rhyme or reason. And if you're a bodily autonomy person, and if you argue that the woman's bodily autonomy is the most important thing, then why does viability matter at all? If the most important thing to you is what it's inside the woman's body, unless you're like an evictionist, which is an opinion of some people, that you would exit them out or whatever and force them out, and you survive on your own, I guess, is the method or reasoning. But I don't talk to many pro-choicers who feel that way, but they're just like, it's a woman's body, it's a woman's choice, which of course that ignores the fact that there's a body inside of her body. So I don't think the viability argument really makes a lot of sense to me, because what's it matter that it can live at 24 weeks if you're still going to keep it inside of you? So what does it matter if you get it at 12 weeks or because you could decide in late term, like these people did, that they didn't want the baby for whatever reason. And the craziest thing about this is that they don't plan to do an autopsy on him. You don't. This is in DC. I'm not surprised that DC doesn't want to do an autopsy on these babies to find out how deep the corruption is, how deep the perversion is. I'm not surprised, but people should demand that they do this just for if you want to just uphold any sort of human decency. But you know what? Gosnell, when he was on trial, the media didn't want to cover that. I think it was the Daily Caller, and they did put this in the film. But I recall when it was kind of happening that the media was really trying to not cover it, and the Daily Caller called out the fact that the media was trying to ignore it, and then more people started talking about it. But was it a huge national story that it obviously could have been? No. Then I'm surprised how many people still don't know about Gosnell. Pretty gruesome stuff. And they didn't even show the picture. I don't even think they showed the picture of the baby in the film. You had to like go to a website and look at the photo, and you can still go to like the Gosnell movie, I think, and click and find the link and see the baby that someone took a picture of. But they'd induce them and then they'd snap their spines. These babies that were viable that could have lived. But that was just their protocol. And I don't know if it's all because maybe they sold some, because the bigger they are, the more you can get for their bodies. And I don't know how much of it is he's just a psychopath, because he just had fetal tissue, body parts everywhere. It was like Dean Cain was when they were working on the film, he's like, you guys are laying it on really thick, like hands in jars and all this kind of stuff. And they were like, dude, and they like would show him a picture of video footage of what it was like. And they even like went to his house to find stuff. They had like a warrant, and he just sat down on the piano and started playing piano. And they're just looking like, this is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. But people wanted to protect him because they didn't want it to become a big anti-abortion thing. So if you want to stand for those situations where you feel it's dire, where a woman actually like really needs to do it for, which I don't, I can't get with most reasons that people claim are good reasons, virtuous reasons, but some women, most women for a matter of fact, do it out of convenience. And I don't mean that it's an easy decision. It shouldn't be an easy decision because it's a human being. But not being able to financially afford it, that reason is creepy, especially to me, because I'm like, I didn't grow up in like always plentiful times financially. I just can't imagine looking at a sibling and being like, you know what, life would have been better if you weren't here. Like, that's weird to me. It's creepy. It's a eugenics. The idea of eugenics was trying to breed out suffering. And of course, there's an elitist view of who has to be breeded out to prevent the suffering. But that's what people are doing. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you. There's 5 babies, but I only have picked 2. The first 2 that I talked about. If you guys want to go to Live Action site and read the rest of that article and see the rest of those images, they are hard to watch, but I will show you the first 2 that I talked about. So here we go. So the first one was the baby boy, and the second one is the baby girl that I read in the article about. Again, old enough to feel pain. and they don't want to do an autopsy. So continue to fight against the evils here, because that's evil. I don't know. You can look at those images. I'll just show them one more time. Tell me those aren't human beings. They didn't deserve more dignity than that. Can you really give me good reasons why that should have happened to them? Now, if they want to do an autopsy and say that it medically wasn't whatever, but even so, having a natural death would have been far more dignity than that. But they don't even want to do that. They don't want to do the autopsy. Last I heard, as far as when I looked it up today. Now, maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they'll change their mind. Especially if people keep pressing. But people cannot be so devoted to their ideology that they're not willing to do the right thing. Because if what they're saying, live action, according to their experts, there's a couple different things that they are violating in that abortion clinic. So at the very least, if you're an activist, wouldn't you at least want them to make sure that they are up to code, up to standards? And you know the reason why they went to Gosnell's clinic is because they got some kind of tip on drugs. And then they went into the abortion clinic, and then they just kept finding weird thing after weird thing, like the cast everywhere, the filth everywhere, medical waste everywhere. So even if you were pro-choice and you were looking at the stuff that went down in Gosnell's clinic, they were not operating in a sterile sort of way that helps women. Like I said, women would go there and things would be so filthy. They'd leave with an STD. But that was a place that people didn't want to talk about, and didn't want to talk about the things that happened there because they were so gung-ho on protecting abortion that they couldn't see these other women who were victims. There were women who died because it was such an unsafe place. And I think before the case of the 6 kids, there was a woman who, they alleged that had died because of his clinic, but he just kept getting away with stuff. And a lot of these people, they say that we need abortion for women of color. A lot of those people who were harmed in Gosnell's clinic were women of color. So they have all these narratives to protect this really, really filthy, evil institution. And I cannot sugarcoat it today. Ugh. I know it's hard to talk about, and I know it's probably hard to see. It was hard for me to see and to show. But one of the reasons why Uncle Tom's Cabin was so important at the height of the Civil War, or just or leading up to it or whatever. I can't remember what year the book came out. But it ended up getting adapted into stage plays and so on, and like P.T. Barnum had in his theater. People would watch and see it. It's because a lot of people in the North were just, living their life, weren't really aware of how gruesome the slavery could still be and the plight of the Negro, and it woke people up and reminded them of the evil that was still in their country. So sometimes we need a wake-up call, and I hope a lot of people still see that and read that in article and know that this just isn't right. Thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry it wasn't like a fun and happy kind of show, but it's still an important show. Someone said thank you for showing the truth. You're welcome. You're welcome. I guess someone has to do it. Please make sure you go to blacktnews.com, that you check out my website, check out different articles on the website. I do have a really good article about the moral harm of abortion. A lot of people say that it doesn't affect you. Why do you care? there's a lot of reasons to debunk that. So I think you guys should go check that article out on blacktnews.com, along with other articles that I have. Please check out different merchandise that I have on the website as well. That you guys can support, like this Be Better Not Better shirt. I really like that one. I'm not the victim you're looking for. I do have black tea mugs. I have one here today. I'm not going to drink or anything right now, but yeah, you guys can check out all kinds of stuff on the website. And if you do enjoy what I do here, please consider going to blacktnews.com/donate and leaving a donation on the website. I appreciate all that you guys do. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you guys sharing. I appreciate so many of you logging on and watching the gruesome details of today. But God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.